For the very first time in 14 years, there is a confirmed polio outbreak in Syria with at least 10 cases, according to the World Health Organization. The cases were reported in northeastern Syria among babies and toddlers who were under-immunized. The Syrian government has pledged to vaccinate all children and has accused rebels of attacking crucial humanitarian aid convoys. Jacob Wirthschafter is the managing editor of Syria Direct and joins us via Skype from Amman, Jordan, with the latest. Hi, Jake. Good to see you.
Hi, Debbie.
Tell me a little bit about what you have discovered through your reporting for Syria Direct about this outbreak and how serious a threat this is.
Okay, sure. Well, first of all, I'm absorbing the message from the Syrian deputy prime minister pledging to vaccinate everyone in his country. This war has gone on for more than 2 years now, and guess what? Kids that are infants that are under 2 years old haven't been vaccinated. And that's because of the war. So I'm curious how they're going to implement a vaccination program when the war continues and the Syrian Red Cross is so clearly identified with the Syrian government.
It's a very, very good point. And it seems that perhaps it's unlikely he'll be able to fulfill that promise. Talk a little about the conditions that led to these cases.
So there are a couple of things. One is that the war has gone on for 2 years, and the country has divided into segments that are controlled by the regime and segments that are controlled by the rebels or that are contested. And in those contested areas, there's been a consistent and deliberate plan to deprive those areas of medical supplies and medical personnel. And over the course of the 2 years, the infants who have been born and, in those communities have been deprived of basic vaccinations and medical care. On top of that, you've got conditions of hunger. We have people, we aired pictures on Syria Direct this week of kids throwing pebbles at date palm trees, trying to down date palm, dates before they're ripe because there's no food in the areas that have been blockaded by the regime.
It would seem that hunger is quite a dire and immediate crisis right now, particularly amongst those displaced Syrians, right?
That's correct. And there's a town or a suburb of Damascus called Mohaddamiyah. And we spoke with folks there this week, and they literally said that they faced a brutal choice, which was either to starve or to turn their friends and relatives over to a evacuation and hope that they would be taken care of in regime areas. There were about 500 folks evacuated from Mohaddamiyah al-Sham this past week, and we're hearing from activists there that about 50 of them had been detained by Syrian security services, and nobody's heard from them. Now, those other 400 some plus people are supposedly under the care of the Syrian Red Crescent, but again, the choice seems to be between starvation or submission.
This seems absolutely impossible. Tell me about the rate of displacement. It seems that this number seems to almost balloon by the day. How many more? Give us sort of an update on the number of displaced Syrians and where they're going. And are countries now having to close their borders because there's so many of them?
Well, it's a complicated and thorny issue, but this is what USAID says. American numbers on displaced inside Syria are as high as 5 million people in Syria have been forced to flee their own neighborhoods and homes and go to another part of the country. And then there are the 2 million Syrians that have been forced into refugee status in the neighboring countries of Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon.
And tell me, as I understand it, that the Amnesty International says that Syrian refugees will be deported from Jordan. What do you know about that?
It's good that Amnesty is putting a spotlight on the tenuous situation of Syrian refugees in Jordan. And it is a tenuous situation. The king this week made a statement to the Jordanian parliament just yesterday, saying that Jordan desperately needed the promised aid for these refugees and hasn't received them. And he said that if Jordan did not receive the necessary support from the international community, it would take measures to protect itself, its economy, and its society. It's a not-so-veiled threat. frankly, to the world community and specifically to the American public on the eve of John Kerry's visit to the region. You know, everybody's been making threats around here lately, and I think, you know, I mean, the Israelis are threatening to bomb Iran if Iran has a nuclear weapon, and the Saudis are threatening to arm jihadist rebels in Syria if the Americans and the Europeans don't get behind the Free Syrian Army. And I get the sense the Jordanians are frustrated that they're not getting enough support for the humanitarian assistance that they're providing to the Syrian refugees. And so now you're seeing King Abdullah make a veiled threat that unless something is done to support these refugees, Jordan may need to close its borders and perhaps eject a certain number of Syrian refugees.
Turning the corner on the subject just a little bit, there are reports today that a top commander in the Revolutionary Guard was killed. I just guess I want to know, what do you think about the Revolutionary Guard being on the ground in Syria?
Well, you know that the Revolutionary Guard means Iranian troops. The general public may not. And that's a dimension of this conflict that's very scary to the neighbors again. I mean, Iran has basically decided that it wants to plant a flag in Syria, and it's done so for sectarian reasons, and it's done so for long-term strategic reasons. We've heard reports from our folks inside the different areas that are contested in Syria that they literally hear people with speaking Persian giving orders to their troops over CB radio. So we know that Iranian troops are there. I don't know about the specific gentleman that you're mentioning, but it's an ongoing and persistent problem, and the opposition has called for the removal of all foreign troops from Syrian soil, including the jihadists that, you know, some people call pro-rebel, and the introduction of all these overseas either mercenaries or people with an agenda into this conflict is not going to make it any easier to solve.
All right, we'll have to stop right there. Jacob Wirthschafter, thank you so much. Take good care.
Thank you.